Our first panel of the day features the recipients of the Excellence in Community Programming and Excellence in Museums Awards. And so today we are joined by Sharon Snowshoe. She's the director of the Gwich'in Tribal Council Department of Cultural Heritage. Their project is entitled Gwich'in Gunankuk Gugwanduk, the Places and Stories of the Gwich'in. And it's a recipient of the Governor General's History Award for Excellence in Community Programming. And as we get started, Sharon, would you like to explain your project briefly?
Good day. My project has began 23 years ago in 1992 and completed in 2015. The Gwich'in Tribal Council Department of Cultural Heritage, formerly the Gwich'in Social and Cultural Institute, worked with over 74 elders and traditional land users, ranging from age 55 to 95 years, both on the land and in our communities, to document place names and create an inventory of heritage sites in the Gwich'in settlement region of the Northwest Territories and Yukon. This community-based project grew out of the wish by Gwich'in elders to protect, share, and celebrate Gwich'in place names, and resulted in 3 important outcomes: an online atlas, place name maps, and the official recognition of Gwich'in place names.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And I look forward to talking about your project in more detail. Our next award winners, le projet centenaire de la
The
radiodiffusion.
Centennial Project of Broadcasting in Canada. There's another one for excellency with Alain Dufour and a board who are also part of the SQCRA board and the Emile Bernard Museum. So, hello, would like to introduce your project in a few sentences?
The Musée des Ondes Emile Berliner was approached by the SQCRA in 2019 if we would like to join in celebrating this amazing event of 100 years of radio broadcast in Canada. And we jumped onto this opportunity because we are a radio museum, a sound museum, and found that it was very important that this event was celebrated, but it seemed to run under the radar. Nobody really understood so well how important radio is and still is despite the internet, because we use radio technology on an everyday basis without really reflecting upon it. The SQCRA did most of the research. The Musée des Ondes Emile Berliner took care of orchestrating all these contributions. We also reached out to other local organizations to join, because we are not a very large museum. We were very happy to have more people on board to increase also the volume that we could actually make to listen to our project. We were a little hit by COVID, of course, because most of the events had to be canceled, and we quickly decided that we put all content that we had prepared online on a webpage, so that also all Canadians could join. The project is very generously supported by the government of Canada. And for me and for Alain Dufour, it was really mandatory that we make sure that we reach out as far as we can, that we make sure that all content is in English and in French as far as we were in control of that. And we will continue with this project actually into 2021, because it's important to take advantage when we can to join eventually also again in real, or between real people. But everything that we create, we will make sure that it is continuing to be also accessible on our web platform, which is radio100.moeb.ca. So when people start to look at that, they can be sure that the next time they come, they will find some more and hopefully surprising and entertaining and educational content. Alain, would you like to add something?
Oui, si je
Yes, if I may. Alain Dufour, president of the Quebec Society of Ancient Radio Collectors, and we also work with the museum, Émile Berliner, to implement certain activities with the 100 years of radio broadcast. It started in Montreal, so we thought it was we had a moral obligation to acknowledge it, not only under the angle of technology that is obviously very important, but also under the social and cultural angle, because radio brought several changes in society. Uh, it is a mass communication tool. It was a way for certain groups to speak up, notably for women, starting at the end of the 1920s, shows specifically for women on the radio, with notably Thérèse Casgrain, who became a senator. And it's one way also uh, to have an impact with all communities in Canada, even remote ones. And it is a vector of change. If Canada became important with satellites and space conquest, it is because we wanted to have a connection with all communities. It's one way to make information more accessible, democratic, and available faster for everyone. Another element that is important is the economic aspect, because radio helped to develop the industry, the information industry. Thank you.
And thank you, Anya. I have to say, I'm trying to look at all the gear in your background there. It's a very, very awesome Zoom background for today's conversation and for your project.
As I tried to make it a little inclusive, because the museum has awesome pieces, and it's certainly worth a visit, but currently we are missing our visitors enormously. So I invite everybody to visit us, at least on screen. Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, we're being joined by Dr. Elizabeth Scott, curator of the Western Development Museum, Ryan Andrusoff, the founder of Spirit Wrestler Productions, and Dr. Ashley Andrusoff, who's an assistant professor of history at the University of Saskatchewan. Their project is the Saskatchewan Doukhobor Living Book Project, and it's this year's recipient of the Governor General's History Award for Excellence in Museums, History Alive. Would you like to explain your project?
Thanks so much, Meg. And on behalf of my colleagues, Dr. Ashley Andrusoff and Dr. Liz Scott, I'll give a brief overview of it. I'm a descendant of the original group of Doukhobors who immigrated to Canada from Russia at the turn of the 1900s in 1899. The Doukhobors were an ethno-religious group that were fleeing religious persecution for their beliefs in Russia, primarily their belief in pacifism and their desire to have a more community-based form of worship for their spiritual beliefs. They settled in what eventually became known as Saskatchewan, and while there still remains a community of Doukhobors in Saskatchewan, they became known as the independent Doukhobors. There are very few in number left who are actively practicing, and I felt a time pressure for us to preserve some of the oral history and spiritual traditions of this community while the elders were still alive and with us, and also wanted to have an opportunity to explore the question of how that community has evolved since coming to Canada and where it's going from there. And so in collaboration with my partners from the University of Saskatchewan and the Western Development Museum, we launched the Saskatchewan Doukhobor Living Book Project. And at its core, we performed oral history interviews with over 30 members of the community, ranging in ages from 8 years old to 95 years of age. We recorded a traditional Doukhobor prayer gathering known as a millennia. And from this, we were able to create a number of unique audio-visual artifacts and materials to be able to help tell that story. We produced a audio-visual soundscape that gave visitors the opportunity to experience what it's like to be part of a Doukhobor prayer gathering, to experience their unique 5-part a cappella harmony, which is very core to their spiritual practice. This was incorporated into a museum exhibit that was hosted at the Western Development Museum in Saskatoon last summer. And we also produced a documentary film telling the story of the Doukhobor community in their own words, from their own voices, that looked at how that community had evolved over the past 120 years in Saskatchewan, and looked a little bit to the future as to how they are continuing to deal with their dual identity as both being Doukhobors and as being Canadians.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I'll put the first question to your group, as you've already hit on a couple of the themes there in your answer. I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of collaboration and staying connected during these times.
Thanks so much, Megan. And I'll maybe turn, I think, the question over to my colleagues. I think Dr. Scott may want to take this one in terms of how we've been able to use this to be able to engage in different ways with the community.
Great, thank you, Ryan. This project was a true partnership, and we talk about that a lot. For the museum to have come on board a couple of years after Ryan and Dr. Androsoff had done so much work with the community was a way that we could come on board where trust was already built with the community, trust to tell their stories in their voices in an in-museum experience. And trust building takes a lot of time, relationships take a lot of time. And so this was a really wonderful way for the museum to help showcase greater diversity of stories in Saskatchewan's history with this wonderful built-in relationship that existed prior to us coming on board. So I think that was one of the real strengths in the process, and really a replicable process as we go forward here in post-COVID times now. The collaboration was just a true joy, and I think it's a great model for museums to work with communities who feel that their history has perhaps not been showcased in a way that is organic to them and in their terms. And so for us to be able to just serve the community in that way was really, really special.
Ashley, would you like to add anything?
Just that as a historian, it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to be able to work directly with community. This project was very much developed in consultation with and with the support of the community. The design of the millennia, for example, was very much guided by the participants themselves. So what we ended up creating was something that reflected what those folks wanted to see presented in a public light. And that's really important in the case of the Doukhobors, because so much of what has been presented to the public through the interpretation of particularly scholars, but also journalists, has been cast in a negative light. And so for Saskatchewan's independent Doukhobors to be able to see themselves reflected in a presentation that they took part in creating was really, really valuable to the community.
Wonderful, thank you. And Anya and Alain, I'll put the question next to you about the importance of collaboration and staying connected during these times. I mean, radio is a way, audio storytelling is a way that people are staying connected, but I'm sure you'll get to that.
Yeah, it's certainly that radio by itself speaks or screams out to connect with different partners, because it is a communication tool. During COVID, it was really wonderful that you were feeling more supported throughout the network of partnerships, because it was a bit of a lonesome time. I was at the museum for 3 months, the only person coming in, just to check that nothing happens. And then to know that out there are a lot of people who are working on the same project, helped enormously to just keep the motivation up and the spirit. It's also amazing that these subjects, while they initially sound actually quite confined, sprawl out in all directions. And with the partners, we realized really the enormous width of the history connected with radio and the development of radio, and specifically here in Canada, how much it actually helped to unite this huge country, similar to the railroad, but in a much more humane way. So the collaborations were really a wonderful experience. We have collaborations with other institutions, with a lot of universities, but also with the private companies like Ultra Electronics, with whom we published a book, our first book, and I have it here. So that is Radio History in Canada, or Early Radio Innovations in Canada, sorry. We wouldn't be able to do that with the staff and the people we have only at the museum, but we benefit enormously from these collaborations, and we hope that we continue to do so in the future, and that people are not shy to approach us, because it's a win-win situation.
Alain, est-ce qu'il y a quelque
Oui,
chose à
on a
ajouter?
montré aussi.
Alain, yes. Participation of various partners. Yes, it was very important because, as Anya said, the museum as such did not have the resources to do everything on their own. They didn't not only have the money, you need the expertise. And it's by finding various partners that we were able to have all the elements of the collaboration. For example, the first important activity was an exhibit at the Montreal Polytechnic, and the people from the communication service of the Polytechnic kind of launched all of the programming that was done in 2020, well, up until the COVID happened, but they still did a lot of work to make the 100-year anniversary of the radio known, and others like the Montreal History Center that also collaborate to publish about 10 web pages on the impact of a radio in the Montreal society. So in this sense, we were able to go get the best, so to speak, of each one of our partners to bring a new dimension to the project.
Merci. I think it's really interesting, the idea of being able to reach beyond our own resources, to work with others and to collaborate in that way, and to build something that we couldn't have done on our own. And Sharon, I want to go to you now with this question of collaboration. Your project is multi-generational, and I'd love to hear more about the collaboration that went into your project.
Just on collaboration from working on our project, our cultural has always valued working together and sharing, and this project has been collaborative right from the beginning to the end. And we started with the elders sharing their knowledge because they believed it was important and should not be lost, to working with partners such as Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center at Carleton University, and also with MDT Communications Limited, to make this knowledgeable widely available in different forms, from an online atlas to maps respectively. Our collaboration with Carleton University was particularly beneficial to both parties, as it helped to make our elders' knowledge more readily accessible, and supported the university to grow and share their open source atlas framework more widely. This resulted in the development of dozens of other atlases, from Alaska to South America to Asia. The beautiful maps designed by MDT Communications Limited have drawn much attention to our communities and are a source of great pride and interest, particularly the large wall map that we developed, which is displayed in all public offices. And we worked with a youth, Arlen Charlie. He's a young Ted Lidgwichin author, photographer and videographer. He remarked, when it was possible to work in the office before COVID-19 struck, he always stopped to look at the map which was hung up in the hall. This allowed him to look up a name and help him to memorize the name of the lakes, creeks, rivers, all throughout the Mackenzie Delta, but more specifically up the river where his family originates and calls home. This collaboration work has shown the value of people with different skills and knowledge working together to build cross-cultural understanding and to ensure our ancient land-based knowledge has been documented and carried forward into the future using new forms of technology. Our work has built trust with our elders and resulted in an increased communication between our generations and with outside researchers. It is important to continue this type of respectful, community-based collaboration into the future. Indeed, we see this as one of the ways to advance the process of reconciliation in our country. The more we know and understand each other, the better our world would be. Thank you, Sharon Snowshoe.
Thank you so much, Sharon. The next question that I wanted to put to everyone, and we'll start with the, I was going to say our group out of Saskatchewan, the Living Book Project, is what are some of the challenges that you've encountered in terms of collaboration, especially given certain limitations? And then on the other side, of course, what are some of the learning opportunities that have come out of it?
Ashley, I'm not sure if you want to if you want to maybe tackle some of this from the academic perspective on that, but I just maybe add very briefly to start off this question. You know, I think as both Ashley and Liz were mentioning earlier, you know, part of it is to kind of do this type of collaboration and to build consent with the community. It takes time. It takes time and it takes effort and it takes relationship building. I mean, even for myself and for Ashley, who both come from the Doukhobor community ourselves, and have been lifelong members of the Doukhobor community. For myself in Saskatchewan, Ashley's originally from BC and then joined the Saskatchewan community a few years ago. It still took a lot of time to be able to build those relationships and I think frankly to build trust amongst the community to feel comfortable to tell their story. You know, I think as Ashley had mentioned, because in the past sometimes the Doukhobor narrative had been told pejoratively by outside forces. I think it was all that more important to have our project reflect their voices told in their own voice, literally and figuratively. But there is a lot of work involved in putting that together. Ashley, I'll maybe kind of turn it over to you, because I know you have some thoughts on this from a historian perspective as well.
Yeah, I would certainly echo what you're saying, Ryan, about the importance of building trust and also the challenges that can come with that sometimes. For me, one of the challenges I did not totally expect in doing this project was the part that related to translating the research that I do into a format that was deliberately publicly accessible and accessible to the broadest range of audience possible. So the Western Development Museum had asked me to take the lead on drafting 8 panels, 8 textual panels that would interpret Doukhobor history, belief, and culture for the visitors to the exhibit. And I believe they were to be 125 words each and written at something like a grade 5 level. And I thought to myself, in fact, I think I said to Liz Scott sort of cavalierly, oh yeah, I could do that in my sleep. This has been my life research to look at Doukhobor history, write 8 panels, and they're so brief, should be a very simple thing to do. And then I sat down to actually do it. And mindful that what I wanted to do was make sure that I wrote something that not only was publicly accessible, but also culturally sensitive and factually accurate. And I really struggled to find a good way to do that. And I think it took me something like a day and a half to write the first one. And when we had a follow-up meeting with the Western Development staff, and I said, I'm so sorry that it's taking me so long. It took me a day and a half to write the first one. And they said, that's great. You actually went fast. So, you know, it's such important work, I feel, as an academic, to be able to make sure that the product of my work is available to the broadest possible audience, but that brings some challenges with it. So for me, that was a really valuable learning experience to go through that process.
I'll just jump in quickly. One of the challenges that I thought was really interesting as both a historian and curator of a provincial museum was it was a very humbling experience working with Ryan and Ashley, because there were a couple of times where I actually made a few assumptions about artifacts. The best example is that we have a beautiful late 19th century Doukhobor rug, and I assumed we would display this on the floor, and I thought of this wonderful plexi case we could build and people could come walk around the rug. And what I learned very quickly was that that was an assumption. It was a cultural assumption on my part. But the Doukhobor rugs were generally hung on a wall or draped on a trunk. And so we worked then together to exhibit the rug in a culturally appropriate way. And so working in partnership, you catch these things and you realize there are perhaps deficiencies in cataloging records, or that the cataloger, 30, 40, 50 years ago may not have had that knowledge. So that was a really enlightening part of the process as a curator. And I just learned so much through this whole the whole process. And I think that's, again, just kind of speaking to the value of partnership.
Thank you so much, Liz. Anya and Alain, I'm going to go to you now. I know you've talked about the issues of just, I hate to, it's a pun, but bandwidth, capacity, being able to figure out how to work when you have a small team. But I'm curious about other challenges and other learning opportunities that have come out of this.
Yeah, for me, it was probably to be completely bilingual. That was a large channel, or a big challenge. I'm German by origin, so everything I read in English and everything I read in French, it always sounds perfect compared to what I would written. So to make sure that we are really professionally having all translations done, avoiding any kind of errors in English or French. That is every day a bit of adventure. The other one was that I have the policy to basically never say no. And I was approached by several organizations with subject or projects that we had not initially planned to do. One was the first Montreal Basement Tapes Day. And I got a bit of cold feet, but I learned to trust the partner organizations, that they have an enormous interest to make these events a success. And saying yes is putting a lot of work, of course, on everybody's desk, but it is really a very positive experience, that everything went beyond my expectations, that they really put a huge amount of work into these projects, that they didn't ask me to do the major load of work, but I was really often just a bystander and getting here the laurels for other people's work. And that is certainly a learning experience I want to keep, that I'm not afraid to continue saying yes, despite the fact that we're really a not very staff-intensive museum. I mean, I'm the only full-time employee, and we have 2 contractors, and that's it. And it's quite big challenge that we had to accept the grant and make this event actually happening over a whole year.
Wonderful, thank you. Alain?
Anya, on peut parler des défis, on peut parler...
So we can talk about the challenges, we can talk about the opportunities, because we were offered the possibility, for example, of doing 4 one-hour programs on the radio. It was not anticipated at first, but since we're a small team, it's possible to organize things despite all. We don't have any constraints of collective agreements. I'm not against unions, not at all, but I'm just saying we have full freedom for doing what we think needs to be done and to be opportunistic. And this kind of prepared us to face COVID also, because when that happened, we took the information we had and we put it on the website, radio100.mob.ca. If you want to go there after this program, you'll see that there's a lot of content on the history of the CBC. I like the fact that you did radio programs about the 100-year anniversary of radio. C'est merveilleux. It's great.
I'd like to go to you now about the challenges that you've experienced and also the learning opportunities in working on this project.
Our challenge that we had was with this project, we had to do a lot of fundraising to do the project throughout the project when it began, and all these years of collecting the information, and like with our elders, when we have researchers coming into our community, like it's really good that the researchers come in and get to know the people and explain the project to the people in the communities. And from there, they'll develop a good relationship with our people. And people are willing to share their knowledge. As long as they understand like what your project is about and what information you're collecting. But with us, it's always fundraising. That's a challenge for us.
And any learning opportunities and any good things that came out of it? I know you mentioned the ability to bring in people from the outside to be able to collaborate and speak, but I was wondering if there was anything else.
I think the learning opportunities like that we learned from this project is that we were able to collect this information before it was lost, and it's good that the elders had the foresight to give direction to collect the information like at that time, because it took like over 20 years to compile all this information into an atlas, an online atlas, and then the maps and to officially be the names to be officially recognized in Canada. So and I think a lot of people appreciate that this work has been done.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sharon. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists and congratulations again to our award winners. This concludes the first panel of today's activities. So thank you for your thoughts. I really appreciate it.